You said you fix broken things, Mr. Whitmore, so I brought you 12 chances to prove it. The words came from Ava Sterling with a smile sharp enough to cut through the cold Saturday morning, while the last tow truck lowered a dead silver sedan onto the patchy grass in front of Caleb Whitmore's little white house on Maple Ridge Road. One by one, the broken cars sat there like metal insults, a rusted Buick with one flat tire, a Mustang with its hood tied down by rope, a Cadillac with cloudy headlights, a pickup missing its grille, and 8 more vehicles that looked as if they had been dragged out of forgotten fields and failed auctions. Neighbors opened blinds. A teenager across the street lifted his phone. 2 men from Sterling Motors laughed beside the curb, wearing branded jackets like uniforms of importance. Caleb stood on his front porch in faded jeans, work boots, and a gray thermal shirt, still holding the cereal box he had been pouring for his daughter when the first engine rumbled outside. He did not shout. He did not step forward with anger. He only watched the cars settle into the morning mist, watched the tow chains swing, watched Ava Sterling remove her sunglasses like she wanted the whole street to see her eyes when she humiliated him. "Problem?" she asked. Caleb looked at her, then at the 12 cars, then at the small girl half hidden behind his leg. Lily Whitmore was 8 years old, with a purple sweater, sleep-tangled blonde hair, and a face that had already learned too much about bills on the kitchen table and grown-ups whispering after dark. "Daddy," she said softly, "why is everyone laughing?" The question moved through Caleb more deeply than any insult Ava could have thrown. The wind carried the smell of old oil, wet leaves, and tow truck diesel. Somewhere, a dog barked once and then went quiet, as if even the neighborhood understood that something cruel had arrived dressed up as a joke. Ava stepped closer to the sidewalk but not onto his property. "You embarrassed me in my own dealership, Caleb. You told me no in front of my people. So I figured I'd return the favor." One of her employees chuckled. Another whispered, "This is priceless." Caleb's eyes did not leave the cars. His hands were rough, scarred by years of honest work, but steady around the cereal box. "These yours?" he asked. Ava smiled wider. "Not anymore. Consider them a gift. Scrap, junk, whatever you people call opportunity." Lily's fingers tightened around the hem of his shirt. Caleb slowly set the cereal box on the porch rail. The box leaned there in the quiet like something ordinary trying to survive an extraordinary morning. "You had 12 cars dumped at a single father's door," he said, voice low, calm, and clear. "In front of his child." Ava tilted her head. "I gave you inventory." "No," Caleb said. "You gave me a mirror." That made the laughter stumble, not stop completely, but lose its rhythm. Ava's smile flickered for half a second before she recovered it. "Fix them, genius. Sell them. Pray over them. I don't care. Just don't come crying when the city finds you for turning your yard into a junkyard." Caleb stepped down from the porch, each boot touching the wooden steps with the quiet patience of a man who had learned long ago that dignity was not weakness. He walked to the Buick first. He didn't open the door. He didn't touch the hood. He simply crouched beside the front fender and brushed away a line of dirt with his thumb. Under the grime, the paint was not dead. It was hidden. A deep blue shimmer waited beneath years of neglect. Caleb's expression changed so slightly that only Lily noticed. "Daddy," she whispered. Ava folded her arms. "What, you found gold?" Caleb stood and looked across the line of broken cars. The Mustang. The Cadillac. The old pickup. The Buick again. His eyes moved the way a master mechanic's eyes move when a machine begins speaking in a language other people never bothered to learn. "No," he said quietly. "Something better." Ava laughed once, but it came out thinner this time. "And what would that be?" Caleb turned back toward his daughter, and the morning light caught the gray at his temples, the tired kindness in his face, the quiet strength of a man who had been underestimated so often he no longer mistook noise for power. He knelt in front of Lily and zipped her sweater to her chin. "Sweetheart," he said, go inside and finish breakfast. Are we in trouble? She asked. Caleb looked at the 12 broken cars blocking his little house, then at the rich woman who thought cruelty was control, then at the employees waiting for him to break. A slow breath left him. Not yet, he said. Sometimes trouble arrives with wheels. Lily gave him a small, uncertain nod and stepped back into the house. Caleb rose, turned toward Ava, and for the first time that morning, he almost smiled. You should have checked what you were throwing away. And just like that, the street grew quiet. 3 days before the tow trucks came, Caleb Whitmore had been standing beneath the cracked sign of Whitmore Auto Repair, listening to the slow tick of a cooling engine and wondering how long a man could keep a place alive on faith alone. The garage sat at the edge of Millbrook, Ohio, between a bait shop and a shuttered tire store, with 2 service bays, 1 old coffee maker, and a concrete floor stained by 20 years of work that nobody ever clapped for. Caleb had opened it after his wife passed, not because it promised riches, but because it let him pick Lily up from school every afternoon and still pay most of the bills before the red letters became final notices. That morning, the rent was 9 days late. The electric company had called twice. The bank had sent a polite envelope with impolite meaning. Still, when Mrs. Hanley from 2 streets over came in with a loose battery cable, Caleb fixed it and charged her nothing because her husband was in the hospital and she had already cried once before handing him the keys. That was the kind of man Caleb was. Quiet did not mean empty. Poor did not mean small. At 10:17, a black Porsche rolled into the lot with the confidence of something that had never been denied space. Ava Sterling stepped out wearing a cream-colored coat, pointed heels, and the expression of a woman used to doors opening before she reached them. Behind her came a young assistant carrying a tablet and a paper cup of coffee, both held like sacred items. Ava looked at the faded garage sign, then at Caleb's oil-marked hands, then at the half-repaired pickup on Bay 2. You are Caleb Whitmore, she asked. That depends on who is asking. Her mouth tightened. Ava Sterling. Sterling Motors. Caleb knew the name. Everyone in Millbrook knew the name. Sterling Motors had glass walls, free espresso, and flags tall enough to be seen from the interstate. His place had a bell over the door that sometimes stuck in winter. What can I do for you, Miss Sterling? Caleb asked. She pointed toward the Porsche without looking back at it. It needs to be ready by noon. My father's charity luncheon is today, and I need someone who understands old engines. Caleb glanced at the car, then at the work already waiting. I can take a look this afternoon. Ava gave a small laugh, as if he had misunderstood the shape of reality. No, you can take a look now. The assistant shifted uncomfortably. Caleb wiped his hands on a blue rag. I have customers ahead of you. I am not asking for a favor, Ava said. I am bringing you business. Her eyes moved around the garage again, landing on the peeling paint, the patched air hose, the stack of unpaid parts invoices near the register. People like you should be grateful when people like me bring business. The words did not get loud, but they filled the room anyway. The old coffee maker hissed. A wrench rolled slightly on the workbench and stopped. Caleb looked at her for a long moment, not with anger, but with the kind of disappointment that makes arrogance feel suddenly childish. People like me, he said. Ava lifted her chin. You know what I mean. I do, Caleb answered. That is why I am going to say no. Her assistant looked up fast. Ava blinked once. Excuse me. Caleb folded the rag and set it beside the register. I fix cars, Miss Sterling. I do not fix disrespect. For the first time since she had entered, Ava Sterling had no instant reply. A man waiting for his oil change looked down at his boots. Mrs. Hanley, still near the door, held her keys against her chest and watched Caleb with wet eyes. Ava's face cooled into something polished and dangerous. You will regret embarrassing me. Caleb stepped back toward the pickup in Bay 2. Maybe. But Lily would regret it more if I taught her. That money gets to talk to people that way. Ava stared at him as if his answer had struck a place she did not allow anyone to touch. Then she turned, heels clicking against the concrete, and walked back to the Porsche. Before getting in, she looked once more at the small garage, the tired sign, the man who had refused to bow, and her voice came low through the open door. You want to stand on dignity, Mr. Whitmore? Let us see how much it weighs when the whole town is laughing. Caleb did not answer. He only watched her drive away, the Porsche shining under the pale Ohio sun, while the bell over the shop door trembled behind her like a warning. By noon, the 12 cars had turned Caleb's front yard into the most talked-about corner in Millbrook, and by sunset, the whole town had chosen a side. Some people slowed down just to stare. A few laughed through their rolled-down windows. One neighbor, Mr. Haskins, stood at the edge of his driveway with his arms folded and a frown carved deep into his face, already worrying about property values and city codes. Caleb heard every whisper, every tire crunching over the road, every little burst of amusement from people who thought humiliation was harmless when it happened to someone else. But he did not rush. He did not call Ava. He did not drag the cars away in shame. Instead, he filled a 5-gallon bucket with warm water, dropped in an old sponge, and began washing the Buick first. Lily watched from the porch steps, her breakfast untouched, her sneakers dangling above the worn boards. Why are you cleaning them if they are junk? She asked. Caleb ran the sponge slowly across the hood, cutting a clean path through gray dust. Because the way something arrives is not always what it is worth. Lily tilted her head. Like people. He looked back at her, and for a second the tiredness in his face softened into grace. Especially people. The morning wind moved through the maple trees, shaking loose yellow leaves that landed on roofs, windshields, and rusted trunks like small pieces of mercy. Caleb worked one car at a time. He wrote down vehicle identification numbers in a small black notebook. He checked tire dates. Body seams, engine plates, old inspection stickers, and the hidden places where careless people forget that truth can wait patiently under dirt. The Mustang looked worse than the others, but Caleb noticed the original fastback trim beneath the scratched primer. The Cadillac had a cracked dashboard, but its frame was straight, its chrome genuine, and its mileage strangely low. The pickup was missing its grille, but the engine block carried a rare stamping he had not seen in years. With every discovery, his silence grew heavier, not with fear, but with understanding. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a white city vehicle pulled up to the curb. A code enforcement officer stepped out with a clipboard and the careful expression of a man who did not enjoy bad news but delivered it often. "Mr. Whitmore?" he asked. Caleb stood from beside the Cadillac and wiped his hands. "Yes, sir." The officer looked at the cars, then at the house, then at Lily standing quietly near the porch. "We received several complaints. You cannot keep unregistered, non-operational vehicles on a residential lawn. I have to issue a warning. 48 hours to correct it." Lily's face fell. "Daddy, what happens after 48 hours?" The officer glanced at Caleb, uncomfortable now. "Fines, possibly towing." Caleb nodded once and accepted the paper. "I understand. No argument. No excuses. Just dignity." After the officer left, Lily walked down the steps and stood beside him. "Are we going to lose the house?" Caleb folded the notice carefully and slipped it into his back pocket. "Not today." "But what if Miss Sterling wanted that?" Caleb looked down the street where the tire marks from the tow truck still darkened the pavement. Then she forgot something important. "What?" Caleb picked up his notebook and tapped it gently against the Buick's fender. A joke can become evidence when the wrong person understands it. Lily did not know what that meant, not fully, but she heard the change in his voice. So did Mr. Haskins across the street, who had stopped pretending not to listen. Caleb opened the Buick's driver's side door with a careful pull. It creaked like an old house waking up. The inside smelled of dry leather, dust, and old gasoline. He reached beneath the dash, then paused. A wire had not been worn down by age. It had been cut clean. He moved to the glove compartment. Empty. Then to the door panel, where one screw sat newer than the rest. His eyes narrowed. He went inside for a screwdriver, came back out, and removed the panel slowly. Lily held her breath. Behind it, wrapped in a faded service receipt, was a small envelope. Caleb opened it and found a title document, a dealership transfer form, and an old photograph of a younger man in a Sterling Motors cap standing beside the very same Buick, one arm resting proudly on the roof. On the back of the picture, in blue ink, someone had written, "Thomas Sterling, summer of 1989, first car I ever saved." Caleb stared at the name. Ava's father. The laughter from the street seemed very far away now. Lily whispered, "Daddy, is that important?" Caleb folded the photograph with care, the way a decent man handles someone else's memory. "Yes, sweetheart," he said. "It means these cars were never trash." He looked across the line of broken vehicles as the sun dropped lower over Maple Ridge Road, and for the first time, the 12 silent machines no longer looked like punishment. They looked like a confession waiting to be heard. That night, after Lily fell asleep on the living room couch under her mother's old quilt, Caleb carried the envelope from the Buick into the garage behind the house and laid every paper beneath the yellow glow of a hanging work lamp. Outside, the 12 cars sat under the Ohio dark like quiet witnesses. Frost gathered along their windshields. The street was finally still. No laughter. No phones. No neighbors pretending to water dry lawns just to stare. Only the soft hum of the lamp, the distant sound of a freight train, and Caleb's pencil moving across the pages of his notebook. He wrote slowly, not because he lacked confidence, but because truth deserved careful hands. Buick Riviera, clean-cut wiring beneath dash. Hidden title transfer. Photograph connected to Thomas Sterling. Mustang fastback, original trim, rare engine plate. Cadillac, low mileage, altered inspection record. He stopped there, leaned back, and rubbed both hands over his face. This was no accident. These cars had not simply been neglected. Someone had wanted them to look worthless. Someone had wanted them out of sight. At 11:38, Caleb opened his old laptop, the one with a cracked corner and a battery that only worked when plugged in, and searched public auction records, dealership filings, and county tax documents. He still remembered how. Years ago, before grief narrowed his life down to school drop-offs, lunch boxes, and unpaid bills, Caleb Whitmore had been known in another world. Not famous, not flashy, but respected. Collectors in Arizona, California, and Florida had trusted him with cars worth more than some houses. He could hear a failing bearing before a computer detected it. He could read a restoration sheet the way a pastor reads scripture, with patience, reverence, and attention to what others skip. But when his wife died and Lily stopped asking when mommy was coming home, Caleb left that world without ceremony. He chose bedtime stories over auction rooms. He chose peanut butter sandwiches over private clients. He chose fatherhood, and he never regretted the cost. A little after midnight, Lily appeared in the garage doorway, wrapped in a quilt, her eyes heavy but worried. "Daddy?" Caleb turned quickly. "Hey, sweetheart. You should be asleep. I woke up and you were gone. I am right here." She walked to him barefoot across the cold concrete, and he lifted her onto the stool beside the workbench. She looked at the papers, the notes, the old photograph. "Are you fixing the cars now?" Caleb glanced toward the dark windows where the shapes of the vehicles waited outside. "Not yet. First I am listening to them." Lily frowned in the gentle way children do when grown-up words are almost beautiful but not quite clear. "Cars do not talk." Caleb smiled. "They do if people lied about them." She leaned against his arm. For a moment, the garage did not feel poor. It felt holy in the small, human way a room can feel holy when love keeps working after everyone else has gone to sleep. Caleb opened one record and found the first crack in the wall. The Buick had been listed 6 months earlier as a destroyed asset with a salvage value of $400. But the title in his hand showed private collection status, full ownership retained by Sterling Family Holdings, and no official salvage declaration. The Mustang had a similar record. So did the Cadillac. Different dates. Same pattern. Same signature. Derek Sloan. Caleb had met Derek once, a smooth man in a navy suit who stood beside Ava at community events and smiled like a locked door. Caleb printed what he could, saved screenshots, and took photographs of every document with his phone. Lily watched quietly until she whispered, "Is Miss Sterling in trouble?" Caleb did not answer right away. He thought of Ava's cold smile, her cruel words, the way she had used money like a raised wall. Then he thought of the photograph, Thomas Sterling's proud hand on the Buick, and the possibility that a daughter had inherited an empire full of rooms she had never truly entered. "Maybe," he said. "But maybe she does not know it yet." Lily looked at him. "Are you still mad at her?" Caleb closed the folder and rested his hand over it. "I am disappointed." "That is different. What are you going to do?" Outside, a breeze moved through the yard, and one of the old car doors gave a faint metal click, like a secret shifting in its sleep. Caleb looked at the 12 vehicles, then at his daughter, then at the city warning folded beside his notebook. "I am going to do what we do, Lily." "Fix them?" she asked. Caleb shook his head slowly. "First, we find out who broke them." By the next afternoon, the story had grown legs, put on shoes, and walked all over Millbrook before Caleb had even finished his second cup of coffee. At Sterling Motors, employees whispered beside glass offices and polished showroom cars, passing around clips of the 12 vehicles on Caleb's lawn like they were watching a harmless small-town comedy. Ava Sterling tried to enjoy it. She sat behind her wide desk overlooking the sales floor, her cream coat replaced by a charcoal blazer, her coffee untouched, her phone lighting up every few minutes with laughing messages from people who thought she had won. But something about Caleb's last words stayed with her. "You should have checked what you were throwing away." She told herself it was pride. She told herself poor men used mystery when they had no power. Then Derek Sloan walked in without knocking, smiling too quickly. "Good news," he said. "The town is eating it up." Ava looked toward the showroom windows, where a red convertible turned slowly beneath the lights. "And the cars?" Derek waved a hand. "Gone from our books. Gone from our lot. Gone from our problem." Ava's eyes narrowed. "That is not what I asked." Derek's smile thinned. "They were dead assets, Ava. Your father kept sentimental junk. I cleaned it up." Before she could answer, her assistant appeared at the door. "Miss Sterling, Caleb Whitmore is here." The showroom seemed to lower its voice all at once. Ava stood. "Send him in." Caleb entered through the front doors wearing the same work boots, the same faded jacket, and the same calm expression that had bothered her more than anger would have. He carried a cardboard folder under one arm. Behind him, visible through the glass, 3 vehicles idled near the curb, the Buick, the Mustang, and the Cadillac. Not perfect. Not fully restored. But running. The Mustang's engine gave a low, steady growl that rolled through the showroom like an old truth clearing its throat. Salesmen stopped smiling. A receptionist froze with one hand over her keyboard. Ava walked toward him slowly. "You got them running." Caleb nodded. 3 of them. Derek forced a laugh from near the office door. "Congratulations. You made Scrap cough." Caleb turned his eyes to him. "No, Mr. Sloan. I made evidence start." The room went still enough to hear the soft hiss of the espresso machine in the customer lounge. Ava's face changed, not much, but enough. What does that mean? Caleb placed the folder on the hood of a brand new sedan displayed in the center of the floor. He did it gently, with more respect for the paint than Derek had shown for the truth. It means the Buick outside is still titled under Sterling Family Holdings. It was never legally salvaged. The Mustang was listed as destroyed, but its original engine is intact. The Cadillac's mileage records were altered after your father's estate inventory. Ava looked at Derek. Derek looked at the folder like it had teeth. That is ridiculous, he said. He is a mechanic playing detective. Caleb opened the folder and slid out the old photograph of Thomas Sterling beside the Buick. Ava's breath caught before she could stop it. The showroom lights reflected across the glossy paper, over her father's younger face, over the old Sterling cap, over a smile she had not seen since childhood. Her hand moved toward the photograph but stopped halfway, as if memory itself might burn. Where did you get that? She asked. Inside the Buick, Caleb said. Hidden behind a door panel with title documents and transfer forms. All signed by the same man. He looked again at Derek. You. Derek stepped forward. You trespassed into company property. Caleb's voice stayed quiet. You had those cars left on my lawn and called them a gift in front of half the neighborhood. A young salesman lowered his eyes. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my goodness." Ava picked up the transfer form, her fingers trembling now, not from fear alone, but from the awful weight of realizing she may have laughed at the wrong person and trusted the wrong one. Derek, she said, tell me this is a mistake. Derek straightened his tie. Ava, this man is trying to embarrass you because you embarrassed him. Do not let a grease-stained nobody manipulate you in your own dealership. The insult landed, but Caleb did not flinch. He simply closed the folder halfway, leaving the photograph visible. You can call me whatever helps you breathe, he said. But numbers do not care about names. Signatures do not care about suits. And old cars remember who touched them last. Ava stared at him. For the first time, she was not seeing a poor mechanic or a wounded father or a man she had tried to shame. She was seeing someone trained by patience, sharpened by loss, and anchored by something money had never taught her. Outside, the 3 rescued cars kept running at the curb, steady and alive. Caleb picked up the city warning from his folder and placed it beside the title documents. I have 48 hours before the city fines me for what you sent to my house, he said. So here is what happens now. I am going to document every one of those cars. I am going to protect my daughter. And if these papers say what I think they say, then this dealership is not standing on success. It is standing on a lie. No one moved. No one laughed. Even Ava Sterling, who had built her life on polished answers, stood silent beneath the showroom lights while the man she mocked turned her joke into the first honest thing that room had heard in years. Derek Sloan did not raise his voice, and that was what made the moment colder. He looked at Caleb with the practiced calm of a man who had signed too many papers in quiet rooms and believed silence always belonged to him. You are confused, Derek said, smoothing one hand down his navy tie. You found old documents in vehicles you had no right to inspect, then walked into a private business with accusations you clearly do not understand. Caleb stood in the middle of the Sterling Motors showroom, surrounded by polished cars, bright windows, and people who no longer knew where to place their eyes. Ava still held the photograph of her father. Her thumb rested over the faded edge, where Thomas Sterling's handwritten note curved beneath the summer light of 1989. For a moment, she looked less like an owner and more like a daughter who had just heard an old voice call her name from another room. Caleb saw it, and his tone softened. Miss Sterling, I am not here to hurt you. Derek laughed once. How noble. Caleb turned to him. I am here because someone already did. The words landed cleanly, without drama, without force, and still the room seemed to tighten around them. Derek reached for his phone. I am calling security. Ava looked up. No, Derek froze. Ava. No, she repeated, quieter this time, but stronger. Let him speak. The sales floor went still. Caleb opened the folder again and laid out 3 papers in a neat row, the Buick title, a county asset declaration, and a service inventory from Sterling Motors dated 7 months earlier. He pointed, not with arrogance, but with the patient precision of a man showing a child how to read a map. Same. Vehicle identification number. 3 different values. Here it is listed as a private collection vehicle. Here it is marked as destroyed. Here it is transferred internally for $400. Ava swallowed. That cannot happen by mistake. No, Caleb said. It usually happens by design. Derek stepped closer, his smile gone now. You are making a very serious claim for a man with overdue rent and a lawn full of junk. That one was meant to wound. Caleb felt it pass by him and fall to the floor. My rent does not change your signatures. A young woman at the reception desk covered her mouth. One of the older mechanics from the service department, a man named Roy, leaned in from the hallway with grease on his sleeve and worry in his eyes. Ava turned to Derek slowly. Did you move my father's cars off the books? Derek shook his head. Your father was sentimental. Sentiment is expensive. I protected this company. That is not an answer. It is the only answer that matters. The old arrogance in Ava's face cracked then, not because Caleb had humiliated her, but because truth had finally walked past the walls she paid people to build around her. Caleb gathered the documents back into the folder. There are 9 more cars to examine. If the pattern continues, this is larger than a bookkeeping error. Derek's phone buzzed in his hand. He looked down, read something, and his jaw tightened. Caleb noticed. So did Ava. What is it? She asked. Derek pocketed the phone too quickly. Nothing. Then, as if choosing the oldest trick in the world, he turned the room against the poor man. Ask yourself why he is really here. He wants money. He wants attention. He wants revenge because you embarrassed him. Caleb's eyes moved to the showroom glass, where the 3 repaired cars idled outside under the pale afternoon sun. If I wanted revenge, I would have posted everything online this morning. Ava looked at him. Why did you not? Caleb breathed in slowly. He thought of Lily standing behind his leg, asking why everyone was laughing. He thought of the city warning in his pocket. He thought of 12 cars sent as a public insult and the strange mercy of discovering that even cruelty can accidentally deliver truth to the right door. Because my daughter was watching, he said. And I need her to know there is a difference between exposing wrong and enjoying someone's fall. The words changed Ava's face more than the documents had. Respect did not arrive all at once. Sometimes it entered like dawn, first as a thin line of light, then as something no one could push back. Derek moved toward the office hallway. This conversation is over. Caleb called after him, calm and clear. Mr. Sloan. Derek stopped. The Mustang's engine plate was not the only thing you forgot to remove. Derek did not turn around. Caleb continued. There was a dash camera in the Cadillac. Old system, separate memory card. It still works. Ava's breath caught. Derek stood frozen beneath the bright Sterling Motors sign, and for the first time since Caleb had walked in, the man in the expensive suit looked smaller than the mechanic with grease beneath his fingernails. Outside, the Cadillac's headlights glowed softly at the curb, no longer a piece of junk, no longer a joke, but a witness waiting patiently to tell the truth. By dawn the next morning, the Cadillac's memory card sat inside a clear plastic bag on Caleb's kitchen table, beside 2 cups of untouched coffee and a stack of papers that had turned a cruel joke into something much larger than anyone in Millbrook expected. Ava Sterling sat across from him, not in her glass office, not behind a polished desk, but in a wooden kitchen chair with a small crack along one leg and sunlight falling across her tired face. She had not slept. Caleb could tell by the way she held the photograph of her father, not tightly, but carefully, as if it was the last honest thing left in her hands. Lily sat at the far end of the table drawing quietly with crayons, looking up every few minutes to study the woman who had made her father the town's punchline. Ava noticed once and lowered her eyes. "I owe you an apology," she said. Lily stopped coloring. Caleb did not rush to rescue Ava from the weight of those words. Some truths needed room to breathe. Ava turned toward the little girl. "I was cruel to your father. And I was wrong." Lily looked at Caleb first, because children who have been taught dignity also learn patience. Caleb gave a small nod. Lily looked back at Ava. "He says people can be broken without being bad." Ava's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. "Your father is more generous than I deserve." Caleb slid the printed records across the table. "Generosity is not the same as trust. We still need to know what Derek did." Ava nodded. At 9 o'clock, they met at First County Bank, not in the lobby where tellers smiled behind glass, but in a second-floor conference room with gray carpet, framed photographs of covered bridges, and a long table that made every problem feel official. Ava's attorney was there. The bank's loan officer was there. 2 accountants from Sterling Motors sat near the end, pale and whispering. Derek arrived last, wearing a dark suit and the kind of calm that had become too polished to be natural. He looked at Ava, then at Caleb, then at the folder in Caleb's hands. "This is becoming embarrassing," Derek said. Caleb placed the clear plastic bag on the table. "It already was." The loan officer adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Whitmore, you said you had information relevant to Sterling Motors' collateral filings." Caleb nodded. He did not stand dramatically. He did not perform. He simply connected his laptop to the wall screen and opened the first file. The room filled with grainy footage from the Cadillac's old dash camera, dated 6 months earlier. There was no violence, no shouting, only Derek in the service bay after hours, speaking with a transport driver, reading vehicle identification numbers from a clipboard, and instructing him to mark the cars as non-operational scrap before removing them from the family storage facility. Ava went still. Derek leaned back. "That proves nothing." Caleb clicked to the next image, a county declaration. Then the next, an altered appraisal. Then the next, a loan schedule where the same vehicles had been used as collateral at values far above what Derek reported internally. 3 quick documents. 2 slow breaths around the table. 1 truth nobody could polish away. The bank officer's expression hardened. "Mr. Sloan, these records appear inconsistent with your sworn asset statement." Derek looked at Ava. "I did what was necessary to keep the dealership alive." Ava's voice was barely above a whisper. "You sold my father's memories and borrowed against ghosts. I protected your name." "No," she said, and this time there was steel beneath the grief. "You used it." The attorney began gathering the papers with the careful urgency of someone who understood that a business problem had become a legal one. Caleb remained quiet. He watched the accountants exchange frightened glances, watched the loan officer make a call, watched Ava finally see the empire beneath her feet not as marble and glass, but as something cracked from the foundation up. Derek tried one last time to turn the room. "And you trust him?" he said, pointing at Caleb. "A mechanic who conveniently found all of this after being humiliated?" Ava looked at Caleb then, really looked at him, at his worn jacket, his tired eyes, his hands marked by work and restraint. "No," she said softly. "I trust what he did when he could have destroyed me and chose not to." The room fell silent. Caleb closed the laptop. "There are still 9 cars at my house," he said. "And a city deadline before sundown." The loan officer lowered his phone. "Given the irregularities, the bank is freezing discretionary control of Sterling Motors pending review." Derek's face lost color. Ava gripped the edge of the table. For a moment, no one spoke, because everyone understood what that meant. Sterling Motors was no longer Ava's throne. It was an endangered building full of employees, debt, secrets, and one last chance. Caleb stood, picked up the memory card, and looked toward the window where Millbrook's morning traffic moved below in ordinary little streams. "Broken things can still be saved," he said. "But not by pretending they are whole." Ava followed him out of the conference room without a word, and behind them, Derek Sloan remained seated beneath the fluorescent lights, surrounded by signatures that finally remembered his name. By sundown, the city deadline was no longer Caleb's biggest problem. The cars were safe now, moved from his lawn to a fenced storage lot behind Whitmore Auto Repair with temporary permission from the bank and a signed hold order from Ava's attorney. Mr. Haskins watched them leave on flatbeds with the embarrassed expression of a man who had complained too early. Lily stood beside Caleb in the shop driveway, holding his hand while the Buick rolled past, its blue paint still dull but alive beneath the grime. "Does this mean we won?" she asked. Caleb looked toward the road, where the last tow truck turned toward town. "Not yet, sweetheart. Winning is easy to misunderstand." 2 days later, Sterling Motors opened its showroom not for customers, but for an emergency asset hearing. The glass building that once made people feel small now felt strangely fragile. Sales banners still hung from the ceiling. A row of spotless new trucks gleamed under bright lights. But nobody was looking at them. Employees stood in nervous clusters near the coffee bar. Mechanics came in from the service bays with their hands washed but their faces still lined with worry. Ava stood near the front window in a black suit, her hair pulled back, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She had signed papers, answered investigators, and watched Derek Sloan escorted from his office by authorities with no shouting, no spectacle, only the quiet ending that comes when lies run out of hallway. Caleb arrived at 9:02 with Lily beside him and a plain folder under his arm. He wore a clean blue shirt, old boots, and the same calm that had carried him through insult, uncertainty, and discovery. Some people looked ashamed when he passed. Some looked grateful. A few could not look at him at all. The bank officer stood at the front with 2 attorneys and a court-appointed receiver. "Sterling Motors cannot continue under current ownership without immediate restructuring," he said. "Debt exposure, asset irregularities, and pending claims have placed the business at risk." A mechanic named Roy lowered his head. A receptionist began to cry quietly. Ava closed her eyes. That was the part no headline ever cared about. When powerful people broke things, ordinary workers paid first. Then a regional auto group representative stood and made an offer to purchase the dealership assets, liquidate inventory, and terminate most staff within 30 days. The room tightened. 3 quick whispers passed through the employees. "That is it. We are done. Where do we go now?" Caleb listened. He let the fear settle before he stepped forward. "I have another offer." The bank officer turned. Ava looked up. Lily squeezed his hand once and let go. Caleb placed his folder on the table. "Whitmore Restoration Group, backed by 3 private collectors and 1 specialty lender, will purchase the dealership's secured assets, assume approved operating debt, retain every employee in good standing, and convert half the facility into a restoration and certified pre-owned service center." No one spoke. The regional buyer frowned. "You?" Caleb nodded. "Me." The man gave a short laugh. "You run a 2-bay garage." Caleb opened the folder and slid forward letters of credit, collector commitments, appraisal projections, and restoration contracts already signed against the 12 recovered vehicles. "I used to run more than that." Ava stared at the documents, then at Caleb, seeing the shape of a life he had never used to impress anyone. The bank officer reviewed the first page, then the second. His face changed from doubt to attention. "These commitments are legitimate." Caleb turned to the employees. "This place forgot what cars are. They are not just inventory. They are promises. They are first jobs, family trips, last gifts from fathers, engines people saved for, memories people trusted you to protect. His voice remained low, but it reached every corner of the showroom. If this offer is accepted, nobody here loses a paycheck because one man lied and one woman was too proud to look closely. Ava took that without defense. Grace sometimes begins when pride finally stops interrupting the truth. The receiver conferred with the bank officer. Papers moved. Pens clicked. The room held its breath. Then the bank officer looked up. Subject to final court approval, the Whitmore offer is the most viable path to preserve operations. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then Roy, the old mechanic, removed his cap and pressed it against his chest. The receptionist covered her mouth. Ava's shoulders trembled once. Caleb did not smile like a man who had conquered. He only looked down at Lily, who was watching him as if the whole world had just learned what she already knew. Ava walked toward him slowly. Why would you save this place after what I did? Caleb looked around the showroom, at the workers, the lights, the cars, the frightened hope returning to tired faces. Because your cruelty did not make your people worthless, he said. The words moved through the room like a bell. Ava lowered her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she had no polished answer ready. Outside the glass walls, the 12 recovered cars waited under gray Ohio clouds, no longer junk, no longer a joke, but the foundation of a second chance. 6 months later, the old Sterling Motors sign was still there, but it no longer stood alone. Beneath it, in clean black letters on brushed steel, a new name caught the morning sun, Whitmore and Sterling Restoration Garage. Caleb had insisted on keeping the Sterling name, not as a favor to pride, but as a reminder that redemption does not erase the past, it teaches the past how to serve something better. The showroom no longer smelled only of leather seats and new car polish. Now it carried the deeper scent of wax, warm engines, fresh coffee, and honest work. Half the building still sold reliable cars to families who needed them. The other half had become a restoration floor, where old metal found its memory again beneath patient hands. Roy ran the service crew with a grin that came easier now. The receptionist who once cried at the hearing had been promoted to customer care manager. Mechanics who had feared losing everything now taught apprentices from the local high school how to listen to engines before replacing parts. And Ava Sterling, who once crossed that same floor as if the whole building belonged beneath her heels, now arrived early in plain slacks and a work shirt with her name stitched above the pocket. She answered phones. She apologized to customers whose calls had once been ignored. She learned invoices, inventory, and humility in the same quiet season. No one forced her to stay. Caleb had offered her a graceful exit the day the purchase closed. She had looked at her father's photograph on his desk, then at the Buick waiting in Bay 3, and said, I think I have spent enough years leaving the hard things to other people. So she stayed. Not as queen. Not as a victim. As someone learning how to rebuild. On the night of the grand reopening, Millbrook came out under a cool Ohio sky. White string lights crossed the lot. Food trucks lined the curb. Families walked between the restored cars with paper plates, soft drinks, and the gentle wonder people feel when they see something they thought was finished shine again. The 12 vehicles that had once sat like insults on Caleb's lawn were now displayed in a perfect row. The Mustang gleamed midnight blue. The Cadillac wore its chrome like Sunday shoes. The pickup had been painted deep forest green and promised to become the shop's courtesy truck. And at the center, under its own soft light, stood Thomas Sterling's Buick Riviera, restored to the exact shade of blue Caleb had found beneath the dirt with his thumb. Ava stood before it for a long time without speaking. Caleb approached with Lily beside him, both dressed simply, both carrying the same quiet peace. Ava looked at the Buick, then at Caleb. My father would have loved this. Caleb nodded. I think he did. Some things are loved long before they are saved. Ava pressed her lips together, fighting tears with the dignity of someone who no longer wanted sympathy she had not earned. "I am sorry," she said again, not for the first time, but this time with the whole town close enough to hear. "For your yard. For your daughter. For what I said in your garage. For thinking money made me taller than people." Caleb looked toward Lily, who was watching Ava with solemn, forgiving eyes. "Then do not waste the apology," he said. "Live differently." 3 quick words passed between them. "I am trying." "Keep trying." "I will." The crowd began gathering near the entrance, where a small ribbon had been tied across the doors. Ava expected Caleb to speak. The employees expected Caleb to speak. Even the mayor, standing near the coffee table with a paper cup in hand, turned toward him. But Caleb stepped aside and gently placed the microphone in Lily's hands. She looked startled, then brave. Her blonde hair moved in the evening breeze. Behind her, the 12 cars reflected the string lights like captured stars. "My dad says broken things are not trash," Lily said, her voice small at first, then clearer. "They are just waiting for someone patient enough to see them." No one clapped right away. The word settled over the lot, over the cars, over the people who had laughed months before and now stood with their hands still, their faces changed. Mr. Haskins removed his cap. Roy wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist and pretended it was dust. Ava looked down, then up, and for the first time her silence was not pride. It was respect. Caleb rested one hand on Lily's shoulder and looked across the business he had not taken to punish anyone, but saved so ordinary people could keep their jobs, so a daughter could learn grace, so a cruel joke could become a second chance. The ribbon was cut. The doors opened. And still, for one sacred breath, nobody moved. Because the whole room understood what dignity had done without ever raising its voice.